Part 74. We fought with the assassins on the way back home. Baiming Qianyu was angry in his heart, and when he saw Zhen Hua catching up, he ignored him and walked straight towards the outside of the general's palace. Seeing that Baiming Qianyu ignored him, Zhen Hua was happy to be quiet, and quietly followed behind Baiming Qianyu. A few people looked at the two people who didn't speak at all, a little confused. They didn't know why the two had a conflict. Leng Yi asked the thoughtful Leng Ning with his eyes. And Leng Ning shrugged his shoulders, indicating that he didn't know either. Several people silently followed behind the two, secretly guessing where Zhen Hua annoyed the prince and made the prince so angry. On the way back, neither of them spoke, and the quiet needle drop in the carriage could be heard. And even the sound of the wheels of the carriage pressing on the official road could be clearly seen. In the end, it was Baiming Qianyu who took the lead in breaking the silence. He threw down Zhen Hua, and his body pressed Zhen Hua, making him unable to move. Prince. Seeing that Baiming Qianyu was emotionally unstable, Zhen Hua called out lightly. Baiming Qianyu looked down at Zhen Hua in a daze, and finally said, "Where am I not as good as being Fubai?" What? Zhen Hua was blinded by this sudden question. Don't play dumb. You know what I mean. Baiming Qianyu only felt that his heart was about to suffocate. He didn't know where he was inferior to that Fubai. Why did Zhen Hua prefer Fubai to dislike him? The pure smile without any impurities made him go crazy with jealousy, and how he wished that the smile was in the face of him. Zhen Hua didn't know how to explain that Fubai was his former subordinate, so he had to choose to remain silent. But his silence became a disguised acquiescence in the eyes of Baiming Qianyu. And his heart hurt so much that he even took a light breath. He held his breath and looked at his face in the darkness in a daze. Finally, he took a deep breath and smiled miserably. It's okay. I don't mind your past, as long as your future belongs to me. In fact, what he is most afraid of is that the future of Zhen Hua does not belong to him. This unprovoked thought made him panic. Afraid that Zhen Hua would one day abandon him, Zhen Hua wanted to ignore the trills of the people on his body. But the slight tingling sensation in his heart made it impossible for him to ignore the trills of the people on his body. Suddenly, the carriage stopped, the horse neighed uneasily. And Baiming Qianyu straightened up violently, pulling Zhen Hua into his arms, looking vigilant. Although it was separated by the carriage, Zhen Hua also felt the murderous aura outside. And he knew that there must be an assassin who wanted to assassinate Baiming Qianyu. Immediately after that, the voice of Leng Yi came, "There are assassins, protect the prince." Then, there was the sound of swords colliding. Baiming Qianyu knew that the space in the carriage was small, and if the assassins stabbed the carriage from the outside with their swords, they would be like meat on a chopping board, to be slaughtered. He made a quick decision and escorted Zhen Hua to escape from the carriage. After getting out of the carriage, the two found that Leng Yi and the others were fighting with more than a dozen black-clothed people, and the sound of swords colliding was particularly harsh in the silent night, making the surrounding residents hide in the room in fear and dare not make a sound. The scene was chaotic. Zhen Hua turned his head to look at the moonlit Baiming Qianyu, and then looked at Leng Yi and the others who were entangled by the assassins. He knew that his opportunity had come. Now, as long as he gets rid of Baiming Qianyu, he can regain his freedom and return to the Holy Dynasty. Baiming Qianyu paid attention to Zhen Hua's expression throughout the whole process. And when he guessed that Zhen Hua wanted to escape from his side, his anger swallowed his reason, and he asked coldly, "You want to escape?" The voice of suspicious measurement came from his ears, which frightened Zhen Hua's heart. He didn't know how Baiming Qianyu would know that he wanted to escape. But now Baiming Qianyu already knows that he wants to escape. If he doesn't escape today, I'm afraid he won't have a chance in the future. Seeing that Leng Yi and Wu Ying were entangled by the black-clothed man, he slapped Baiming Qianyu in the chest with his backhand. Who knew that Baiming Qianyu didn't hide or dodge, and took his palm stiffly. When he landed, there was a sharp pain in his chest, which made Baiming Qianyu tighten his sword eyebrows in pain. But he kept holding Junhua's hand tightly instead of loosening, and tightly grasped the hand that wanted to get rid of him. Junhua didn't expect that Baiming Qianyu would not hide or dodge, and his heart hurt slightly, but he had no room for remorse. He stretched out his hand and wanted to give another palm. And out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of a black-clothed man holding a long sword and stabbing towards Baiming Qianyu menacingly. Before the brain could react, the hand had reached over and grabbed the stabbing sword. Baiming Qianyu was furious, and he didn't notice the assassin's attack, and when Junhua grabbed the stabbing sword with his bare hands, his heart trembled fiercely. At this moment, he didn't care why Junhua wanted to escape. He turned around and kicked the assassin who dared to hurt Junhua's wrist, causing the assassin to snort in pain, and the sword in his hand fell off. Junhua, who grabbed the sword body, also threw away the sword in his hand, and the blood in his palm flowed out, which was not conspicuous in the moonlit night, but it stabbed the eyes of Baiming Qianyu. Baiming Qianyu picked up the sword on the ground and killed the black-clothed man who dared to hurt Junhua with a vicious face, but after a few moves, the black-clothed man died tragically under the angry Baiming Qianyu's sword. And Junhua took advantage of this vacancy, regardless of the injury on his hand, and left everyone to flee from this place. It's just that he didn't run far away when he was chased by Baiming Qianyu and blocked his way. Shen Li, don't challenge my bottom line. Otherwise I'm afraid I won't be able to help but abolish you and imprison you by my side forever. Baiming Qianyu's voice was cold, and he tried his best to control the violence in his heart. Junhua chuckled in his heart. He never thought that one day he would be able to force people to the point of wanting to abolish himself. He glanced back at the battlefield, only to see that more than a dozen people in black had all died under the swords of a few people in Leng Yi. If he continued to run away now, he would definitely be caught by a few people in Leng Yi who were highly powerful, and then, thinking that Baiming Qianyu would really abolish himself, Junhua only felt that his scalp was numb, and the hairs on his body stood up. Prince, are you okay? Leng Yi ran over in 3 or 2 steps. He first glanced at Baiming Qianyu with a gloomy look, and then at Junhua with a cold look. He really couldn't guess what was the conflict between his prince and the young master Shen. It's okay, go back to the palace. Baiming Qianyu walked to Junhua's side, took his right hand that was still dripping blood. A touch of distress flashed in his eyes, but he couldn't help but blame. Next time you encounter this situation, don't take it. Junhua didn't reply, because in that case, he couldn't think calmly about countermeasures, so he could only catch the sword with his bare hands. Seeing that he didn't reply, Baiming Qianyu looked displeased. Did you hear that? Good. Junhua felt that his temper was completely worn out by Baiming Qianyu. Seeing that Junhua agreed, Baiming Qianyu led him into the carriage. As soon as he entered the carriage, Baiming Qianyu took out a box from the dark compartment under the cushion, and at this time, Leng Yi got into the carriage with a firefold to illuminate the dark carriage. Baiming Qianyu opened the box and took out the ointment and gauze from it, and then carefully wiped the blood on Junhua's palm with gauze. Looking at the deep wound on the palm, his eyes showed distress. Does it hurt? What do you say? How could such a deep 2 cuts not hurt? It's just that he's used to having everything to bear alone, and he never complains of pain to outsiders. Next time, you won't be allowed to take the sword with your bare hands. Although Baiming Qianyu's tone revealed a hint of reproach, his expression was very gentle. Especially the hand that applied the ointment to the wound, which was so gentle that it was as if a feather was gently gliding through the palm of his hand. Junhua was very itchy by his gentle movements, as if it was itching into his heart, making him numb, and he couldn't wait to indulge in the tenderness of the person in front of him. After applying the ointment, Baiming Qianyu wrapped gauze around Junhua's injured hand several times, and when he landed, a slender hand was wrapped into a glutinous rice-wrapped roll. Junhua looked at the hand that was wrapped in glutinous rice-wrapped roll. His eyes showed disgust, and it just so happened that the disgust in his eyes was captured by Baiming Qianyu. And he couldn't help but defend himself. This is the first time this prince has helped people to wrap their wounds, and it's normal that it's not good looking. Junhua smiled. But his heart was unexpectedly warm. If he was not Prince Junhua of the Holy Dynasty, he thought that he would always be by the side of Baiming Qianyu as Shen Li. Baiming Qianyu was infected by the smile on his face, and his mood gradually improved after a dull afternoon. He made a look to let Leng Yi go out. Leng Yi immediately understood, turned around and exited the carriage with a firefold. There was no firelight, and the carriage fell into darkness again. Baiming Qianyu reached out to hug Junhua, hugged him tightly in his arms and whispered, "Ziqing, don't leave me, okay?" "Well, good." Junhua sighed lightly in his heart. It seemed that it was impossible to leave the Wanyu Palace for the time being. But it doesn't matter anyway, he is still waiting for his imperial brother to attack Jinghe Kingdom. Thinking of the obscene expressions of the two of Jinghe Kingdom, he can't wait to personally lead the army into Jinghe Kingdom. Getting the answer he wanted, Baiming Qianyu was not very happy. Because he knew that the person in his arms was just too perfunctory himself. The heart was replaced by a dull pain, obviously hugged him tightly, but why was the heart still afraid? Back at the palace, Luju and Liuyan learned that Junhua was injured, and he was fetching hot water and looking for ointment, looking at the wound that was temporarily treated. He couldn't help but complain, "Who is wrapped? It's too ugly." Baiming Qianyu on the side had a cold face and didn't speak. "The prince is wrapped," Junhua replied lightly, and then looked at Liuyan with a playful face. When Liuyan heard that it was the prince's wrapping, she was so frightened that her legs weakened. And she was just about to kneel down and kowtow and shout for mercy. Baiming Qianyu said impatiently, "First help your young master deal with his wounds. This prince has something to do. So I will leave first." With that, Baiming Qianyu turned around and left Junhua's room. Seeing that Baiming Qianyu was gone, Liuyan patted her chest and shouted that it was dangerous. "Be careful next time you speak," Luju reminded. Today is for the sake of Junhua's face. The prince didn't blame her. If she said the wrong thing next time, she wouldn't be so lucky. Remember. Liuyan was also afraid. She glanced at Junhua, and then said with a smile, "The young master seems to like the prince. Otherwise, it would be impossible to catch the blade with his bare hands in order not to hurt the prince." Like? Junhua was silent. He didn't like anyone, so he didn't know if it was a liking. But he really couldn't see Baiming Qianyu injured, so when he saw that someone wanted to kill Baiming Qianyu, he directly reached out and caught the blade. At that moment, he would rather be injured himself than see Baiming Qianyu injured. According to the slave maid, the young master should like the prince, and the prince also likes the young master, so young master, you should cherish this God-given fate. Luju couldn't help but sigh that she had the right medicine that night. As long as Junhua didn't want to escape, Then the prince would never know that Junhua was not Shen Li for the rest of his life. God-given fart. If it weren't for the two of you to get in the way, this prince would have returned to the Holy Dynasty a long time ago. Junhua was sad and angry in his heart. It was these two who hurt him and Baiming Qianyu. If Baiming Qianyu didn't meet him, maybe Baiming Qianyu still only likes women. In the end, he was too lazy to discuss with this girl whether he liked it or not, and after he saw that the wound on his hand was treated, he washed up and fell asleep. As for Baiming Qianyu, who left halfway, he didn't ask, and slept directly. Sleeping until midnight, Junhua was awakened by the sound of pushing the door. He opened his eyes but found that it was pitch black around him, and he couldn't see who walked in at all. Listening attentively and listening to the familiar footsteps, Junhua turned over with peace of mind and continued to sleep. Baiming Qianyu was afraid of waking Junhua, and the footsteps were very soft. He came to the bedside, gently took off his clothes and shoes, and then gently lay down beside Junhua. Feeling the warm body temperature of the person beside him, Baiming Qianyu wanted to reach out and hug it. But he was afraid of waking up the sleeping person, so he only looked at the silhouette in the darkness in a daze. He just looked at Junhua like this, forgetting the time and exhaustion, until the sky was slightly bright. Junhua was awakened by the hot pain in his hands. He opened his eyes, felt that the person next to him was still there, and was a little puzzled. Because at this time, Baiming Qianyu had already gone to the palace to participate in the early dynasty. He turned over and saw that Baiming Qianyu had a pair of bloodshot eyes. And his heart trembled fiercely. "Prince, what's wrong with you? Can't sleep?" How could he possibly sleep? Last night, he inquired about the family sending team that was escorting Shen Li at that time, and unexpectedly learned that Shen Li had escaped marriage on the way, but was caught by them. Thinking that Fubai was also picked up by Yufeng at the place where Shen Li escaped, he vaguely guessed that Fubai and Junhua were a couple. But these two broke up a pair of lovers because of a name he casually named. If he was tempted by Junhua, he would definitely let go of the two of them generously when he learned about it. But now he is reluctant to let go. Love is selfish, not to mention that Ziqing is still accepted into the palace by him. Then Ziqing is his person, and he has no reason to let go. Besides, doesn't Fubai like to resist Yufeng now? Why don't I be selfish once and imprison Ziqing by my side forever? Junhua stared at the tired Baiming Qianyu. His heart twitched and hurt. He didn't know what Baiming Qianyu was worried about. He reached out and took the initiative to hug Baiming Qianyu, and gently patted his back. "Sleep. There will be no trouble when you fall asleep." Feeling Junhua's warm embrace, Baiming Qianyu only felt that his eyes were hot, and he wanted to cry. He hugged Junhua tightly, and said in a thick nasal voice, "Ziqing, don't leave me, you know?" "Well, good," Junhua promised happily, but he felt guilty in his heart. Listening to his promise, Baiming Qianyu did not have a trace of joy in his heart, because he knew that Ziqing was just lying to him, and when he relaxed his vigilance a little, his Ziqing would leave him alone. But he was too tired after not sleeping all night, and he quickly fell asleep after smelling the faint fragrance of grass on Junhua's body. Listening to the shallow breathing of Baiming Qianyu, Junhua didn't get up. He just quietly stared at Baiming Qianyu's tired sleeping face. In the end, he let out a long sigh and said in his heart, "That's it. I will be selfish once before Jinghe Kingdom is captured, and I only love you. Hopefully, until then, you'll get tired of me." He knows that as a prince and minister, he likes people to be fresh. And when the freshness passes, who remembers who is who? Therefore, he only needs to wait for the freshness of Baiming Qianyu to pass, and then he can leave in style.
you.